the story so many times, it's almost like it's a fantasy.
This was real. This is real.
Wonder Doctor is I think at its heart, it's sort of a love story. It's the experience of a relationship between a man and a woman who are struggling, and they've had a baby and they get into an accident. And my character, Adrienne, is confused as to whether she died during that accident or is alive. And Adrienne, Matteo, her husband or boyfriend, excuse me, is the only person that can see her. And they kind of go on this journey back to the inception of their relationship and look at the moments where they went wrong and see the relationship from each other's perspectives. And lots of other things are revealed along the way. It's kind of genre bending, time warping, you know, in the vein of like a Eternal Sunshiny type vibe. But it's quite hard to describe as a film.
Yeah, that's why I was like, you know what, I'll ask Sienna to do it.
Yeah, just a load of adjectives. Yeah, you'll know when you see it what it is.
I also think, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this, but I feel that it's a savvy move that it's coming out around holiday season, because there's something to the structure that reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life or A Christmas Carol, where you're like,
totally,
it's a supernatural trip back through someone's life. I wondered what you thought of that comparison.
That comparison is actually genius. I haven't heard the Christmas Carol one before. I have heard It's a Wonderful Life once before in conversations. Yeah, because I think that idea of going back and exploring your own life and noticing the moments that you didn't notice that were kind of pivotal is a really interesting concept. I would love to be able to do that in reality. I also think it's a perfect movie to be coming out now, because everybody can somewhat relate to the absolute disorientation and discombobulation of my character in this film. I mean, it's and what it's really about is love. And I think that we premiered at Sundance, and the kind of overriding response from the audience members when they finished would just that they wanted to call the people they loved. And I think we're probably looking for connection more than ever. So
now you've talked previously about having this very strong emotional response to the script. So I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about that. What initially really struck you?
It's really hard to say. I think I was really stunned by the things that I didn't expect to happen that happened. And I felt really filled with grief reading it. And then I felt sort of uplifted and moved by the ending, and how I think the thing that always really moves me is just how people get through things. You know, it's really simple, but humans are kind of astounding in that way. And to explore somebody going through something which is so shocking and jarring, and come out the other side and kind of be rebuilding themselves and letting things go. That stuff gets me. Courage, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's not insignificant that we're getting this story through your perspective, through a woman's perspective. I mean, the examples we've cited, Eternal Sunshine, It's a Wonderful Life, we're seeing it, you know, with a man at the center. And I just wondered what you think the female perspective kind of lends this narrative.
I think that it's interesting to sort of examine the female psyche in, you know, as much as it is to examine the males. And I wonder if it's gender specific, like your responses to things. I think grief is probably pretty universal, but the way that it's expressed may be different. And I don't know, I think there's just more room in the world to explore the female experience, you know, as we represent more than half of the population. And that's been an undernourished part of this industry, and it feels like it's changing. So that's good.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, your writer-director, Tara, brings such, well, it's a very personal story for her in a lot of ways, I know. And it's very, as you've kind of touched on, very emotionally raw and open and honest and earnest. And I wondered kind of what was the process like of getting to know her and working with her so intimately on this project?
Well, you know, I knew that it was somewhat personal to her, the story. She and her husband had this car accident, and she'd had this split second where she thought, did I actually die? Which was, in retrospect, looking back, it was odd at first, because I was somewhat playing her. And so when I first met her, I kind of paid a lot of attention and did little things that she did in the movie, which she noticed, and we didn't really comment on, but once we started, that was before, I think once we started shooting, she let it go and it was more mine. But I felt the pressure to do a good job because it was so personal to her, because she, you know, this was her story. And also it's not easy to be a writer director in Hollywood as a woman. And I was just filled with respect. It was also, the crew was, there were so many women. The DP was a woman, the producers are women. It was really exciting to see how things have shifted.
To sort of shift gears and talk about a man, I did want to bring up Diego as well.
Yeah.
I know that you and Diego have been friends for a minute, and I actually read in another interview Tara was talking about Diego slightly resembles her husband in some way, which I just thought was a very, very funny detail. But what was it like to get to work with him so closely on this?
He's about the kindest human that you'll come across. No ego, no arrogance. Is a director as well, so really understands the medium of film and is just gracious and kind and like will mine and mine and mine to get something right, which is the way that I like to work as well. And I think working with someone that you really like, when you have to do such intimate scenes and be so vulnerable, and you know, it would be really much harder if there was somebody with a kind of arrogant energy in that room. So I'm fortunate. He's also just brilliant.
So I did want to talk about the title. I know that Tara has talked about it. The title "Wander Darkly" came from a Lord Byron poem, but I wondered what does the title mean to you? I mean, what's your interpretation of it, and what does it mean within the context of the film?
I'm going to just be really literal. I mean, I think that essentially, I love how poetic it sounds. I didn't know that it was a Byron, that it was taken from Byron, until we were doing an interview the other day. So I don't know why I didn't ask. But I think it's sort of the experience of moving through life in these moments. You're kind of wondering, I'm just going to riff now. And you're wondering darkly. It's obviously a dark, a dark moment in her life, and she's wandering through it. Yes. I just like the way it sounds, and I think that that's what they did too.
No, it's a beautiful title. Absolutely, it's very evocative. Certainly,
it's evocative, and it does fit with the tone of the movie. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that completely, but it is also a very sunny movie in the sense that it's a very LA movie, you know, and I think it's always the cliche to be like, well, LA's the third character, and I think it's kind of true in a lot of ways. We get to see so much of it. And could you tell me a little bit about the process of filming all across Los Angeles?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no better place to make a film than LA. I feel like that, obviously that's what the town was somewhat designed for, Hollywood specifically, but when you have a 5 a.m. pickup and the sun is rising and it's clear blue skies and sunny, it's just like ideal. And it's, as a little girl, when you want to be an actor, that was my image of making a film. So any time I get to come there and work, I'm thrilled, as is my kid, because there's like a pool sometimes. Whereas in London, where I'm shooting now, you know, when you get up at 5 in the morning, it's pitch black until like 9 or something. That's a little bit more challenging. I got to see, Tara lives in East LA, and I hadn't spent much time there as the tourist that I am. And so that was a fascinating thing to see. And to shoot above the 10 freeway and like climb up a little fence and look over that, you know, it was amazing. And we also obviously went out on the boat. I can't remember where we went, but we were in LA.
Gorgeous, yeah.
And saw the dolphins, and you know, it was a real tour. I think that the most difficult moment was probably when the realization happens for me, while not being too specific, and I'm going through a box of belongings, and I felt really like I don't think there's any more I could have given in that moment specifically, and I really felt that on a really deep visceral level. So that's the thing that jumps out as like the deepest pain for me, that moment. But it was really difficult to shift gears within a scene with Diego and be kind of in the scene from the past and then suddenly comment on it from the present. That felt very strange and was really hard to do, and really hard essentially to feel good about, because it's just not what happens in real life. And I think as actors, you spend most of your time trying to do the best job possible of being as natural. That's certainly the way that I like to act. that felt clunky.
Mm.
And real trust in our director, who was like, it's working. We're like, we were being kind of real actory paranoid people.
Well, yeah, it's hard to draw from your own experience when you're doing something that no one has done before.
Yeah, it just does not happen. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, to speak of your director, I read in an interview she had talked about working with you on this, and you know, again, as we've talked, this is so personal, so you two really had to kind of establish this connection. But she had mentioned in casting she was very excited because she says she's always seen you as an ingenue with a character actor soul, which I thought was a pretty apt summation of your work and what you bring to everything. And I wondered kind of what you thought of that. Do you see yourself as a character actor? How does that make you feel?
I mean, that's definitely what I want to be. That's what I've always tried to be. I think that's what I want to disappear into something. I want to get lost in something. I do like to play people that are pretty far removed from myself. I love that she's called me an ingenue. In fact, I'm going to get a little poster made, stick that at the end of my bed, because it's like about the most aspirational, I don't know, it's the loveliest thing to hear. It's everything I want to be. I'm going to let her, I'm just going to pretend that it lands and I agree with it. But you know how these things are. It's a lovely thing to hear about yourself. But I love playing real characters. And I think about some of the women I played, and if you line them all up in like a mugshot scenario, it would be pretty funny. They're all really different. The thing that I'm working on now in London is my own voice. I'm English and I feel completely exposed in it. It's really difficult for me. So I'm trying to sort of find the character within it that's also a little bit closer to me. And that's, I think if you let me loose in a prop cupboard, I'd come out with, you know, I don't know what. But it would be very different to what people know me as personally.
One of my favorite roles of yours, aside from Wander Darkly, is your work as Nina in The Lost City of Zed. I guess we call it The Lost City of Z here in the States, but The Lost City of Zed. I think that film is just incredible. But the way that your role is weaved in, I mean, so often we see this trope of the wife that's left at home and she's there maybe as, well, you said prop cupboard, she's maybe there as a prop, but that is not at all the case in that film. And I loved how intentional it was in bringing humanity to her and showing her side of the story. And I feel like you bring that to a lot of your work, certainly.
Thank you. I also battered James Gray over the head to make sure that I wasn't just the wife stayed at home. And he honored that. And it was really important to him as well that her story was represented. Obviously, that film was, you know, that story took place in an era where the women were left behind and the men got to go off and have adventures. And the adventure of just raising the kids was not something that people focused on. But I think that the way that the movie ends with her experience of the grief of not knowing where those two people are, I thought that was really noble. And he's such a brilliant director and writer and friend. And yeah, I love that film too, because it feels like a proper old-fashioned Visconti or something. It's like there are moments in that where I'm like, that looks like the leopard, or, you know, it's fun to have been in something that's that ambitious.
And that final shot, I will never ever forget.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
He built that little jungle in the back of a room in Belfast.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
Well, you said ambitious, and, you know, to bring it back into Wander Darkly specifically, obviously this is a very, very ambitious movie, and it's my favorite kind because I think that you can pull out certain themes. I mean, you know, what's going to speak to you, you'll read into it certain ways, but I wondered kind of what, we talked about people wanting to call loved ones afterwards, but what do you kind of hope people take away from this beyond that?
I think that the job of any cinema or any art really is to move people. I hope that people have an experience that takes them out of their own for a couple of hours or whatever it is, 1 hour and a half. And that something about the experience makes you feel closer to life and being a human. And that's kind of what I always aspire to. Also to look at the people that you sometimes don't see in society. I did this movie American Woman about a mother last year that came out, and a mother who lost a child. Again, grief. This is really my forte. Yeah. but this is the kind of woman that you wouldn't necessarily focus on, and yet everybody's got their story, you know. And I sort of think that there's something that's quite unifying about sitting in someone else's experience, especially when it's mining something that happens to every human on earth at some point, unless they're rampant sociopaths. But the experience of grief, it's something we all have to think about and deal with, and to see that expressed in a way that might be consoling, or to make you think about how much you love the people that you've maybe been shitty towards. Reach out to them, you know, then it's ticked a box, it's achieved something.
Yeah, absolutely. And to pull it back for a final question, even broader, you know, as we've kind of alluded to, we are at the tail end of one hell of a year. And I wondered if you could tell me something that some things that you've been grateful for this year.
Sorry. I've honestly had, you know, without a doubt, the worst year of my life, and I've been like focused. I'm laughing because there are so many. I'm really grateful to be working. I wish I could list the things I'm not grateful for.
You can, I won't stop you.
Then I'd be back in, yes. No. So yes, I'm really grateful that I get to go to work, even though it feels weird to be on a set with everybody in masks and goggles. I'm grateful that my kid is healthy and happy, that my parents are all right, that I've got a roof over my head and food and an income happening, and they're the greatest friends in the world. There are a million things to be grateful for, and it's actually a good reminder to think about them when you realize that rock bottom has a basement.
Adrienne, wake up! Wake up! This wasn't the beginning of the end. This was the moment when I told you